Airline refuses to let black woman board, but she's an undercover Homeland Security agent. Crackling announcements echo through crowded airport corridors, every passenger on edge amid the daily hustle of people rushing to their gates. A certain tension throbs in the air, as if something monumental is about to unfold before the unsuspecting crowd. A poised black woman stands near the ticket counter, her carry-on bag perfectly balanced by her side. She waits, calm yet alert, while a restless gate agent eyes her suspiciously. No one has any idea who she really is or the secrets she carries with her. They're only seconds away from discovering the remarkable twist that will shatter biases, topple assumptions, and change everything in an instant. Naomi Johnson had traveled through airports more times than she could count. Most people assumed she was just another passenger in a sea of flyers. They would never guess the intricacies of her real job. Her role required anonymity, discretion, and a tight-lipped silence that even her closest friends had learned to respect. Officially, she worked for the Department of Homeland Security. Unofficially, she was often the invisible link in major undercover investigations, protecting the very citizens who brushed past her with minimal notice. That chilly morning in mid-autumn, Naomi awoke to the piercing ring of her phone alarm in a modest hotel room in the heart of Atlanta. She had chosen the location for its convenience. Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport was barely a 20-minute drive away, and she wanted to be on time early to quell the nervous excitement that always pulsed inside her before a new assignment. At first glance, she seemed like any other woman in her mid-30s, coffee-brown eyes, skin bearing an elegant glow from years spent diligently caring for herself, and a warm, confident smile that brightened whatever room she entered. Beneath that exterior was a woman honed for the unexpected, a skilled operative who specialized in infiltration and intelligence gathering. Though her demeanor often appeared easygoing, a flicker in her gaze signaled her readiness for anything. Her assignment today, as far as anyone who read her official briefing knew, was straightforward: fly from Atlanta to Chicago, gather intelligence on a suspected identity theft ring operating across several states, and intercept a high-value target. The suspect, codenamed Silver Hawk, was rumored to be traveling under forged credentials on the same flight. Naomi's mission was to confirm the suspect's presence, follow them discreetly, and if necessary, facilitate an arrest once local enforcement was ready. But her job had taught her that nothing was ever straightforward. It was always wise to anticipate obstacles, and so it proved that morning. She sensed the tension the moment she stepped into the departure terminal. The swirl of travelers, suitcases rolling across polished floors, the calls over the intercom, and the ambience of collected urgency was as normal as breathing to her. Yet there was a hum of something else, eyes lingering on her, subtle signals that foretold the day was about to become complicated. Before leaving the hotel, Naomi triple-checked her bag for any items that might blow her cover. Her Department of Homeland Security badge was tucked away in a hidden compartment, secured with a snap. Over the years, she had grown skilled at projecting an unassuming presence. She dressed in a sharp but unremarkable navy blue pantsuit, a crisp white blouse, and low heels, nothing that shouted for attention. Her thick, wavy hair was swept back into a neat ponytail. She carried herself with a quiet air of confidence, purposeful yet not ostentatious. An inconspicuous black sedan drove her to Hartsfield-Jackson. Once there, she moved swiftly through the doors, scanning the busy terminal. Flashes of real life whirled around her, families juggling children and strollers, business travelers hollering into phones, flight attendants in sharp uniforms breezing past, and TSA officers keeping watch. She caught a whiff of cinnamon rolls from a bakery stand, and just beyond that, the faint tang of coffee from a Starbucks kiosk. The overhead sign displayed flight schedules, blinking with status updates. Already her flight to Chicago was listed as on time. Good sign, she thought, but even the best signs could be deceiving. She glided to the check-in counter of Global Skies Airways, a carrier popular among business professionals for its direct flights to major hubs. Her boss had chosen it for precisely this reason. Too many out-of-the-ordinary factors would raise suspicion, so a large, respected airline was safer for blending in. She approached the agent with a disarming smile. "Good morning," she said, gently sliding her ID and printed ticket across the counter. The agent, a primly dressed woman named Jill, barely looked up at first. Naomi noticed Jill's posture stiffen when she finally glanced at Naomi's identification. There was a minuscule pause, a flicker of something intangible behind her eyes, a spark of disapproval, perhaps, or outright prejudice. Naomi had learned to recognize that look over her lifetime. Often, she tried to interpret it optimistically, but her instincts seldom lied. "Hello," Jill said, in a tone that was businesslike but hollow. "Let me see. Miss Johnson, is that correct?" Naomi nodded. "Yes, that's correct." Checking in for the flight to Chicago, Jill's manicured nails clacked on the keyboard. She frowned at the screen. "You have a carry-on only, or do you need to check a bag?" "Carry-on only," Naomi replied. Jill typed a bit more, then paused. That's odd. I'm not seeing your booking in the system right now. Did you book through a third-party site?" Naomi felt a jolt of concern. Her reservations had been meticulously prepared by her official alias's travel department. There was little chance of an error, let alone a complete disappearance from the system. Yet she played along. "I believe I booked through the airline's official website. Here's my printout." She pushed a neatly folded paper across the counter. Jill studied it, her expression still tight. "I see that. This is a printout, but it's not showing up when I enter your name." Naomi's heart sank. If there was a glitch in her alias's ticket, it could compromise her entire mission. "Do you mind checking again?" The agent sighed, typed some more, and gave a perfunctory shake of her head. "Ma'am, I can't check you in if there's no record of a reservation. You might need to purchase a last-minute ticket." Before Naomi could respond, a queue of other customers began to form behind her. She heard mutters from irritated travelers, anxious to get their boarding passes. Naomi forced a pleasant smile, though inside she tensed, worried that every second of delay chipped away at her carefully laid plan. She had at least an hour and a half before boarding, plenty of time under normal circumstances. But an uncooperative employee could unravel everything. "All right," Naomi said calmly. "Let's try verifying the confirmation number." She read out the digits from her phone. Jill typed them in. Another sigh. "It's not coming up," Jill declared, almost triumphantly. "There's no flight under this confirmation. Please step aside to let me help the next passenger." The brisk dismissal was humiliating enough, but her tone was also pointed. Naomi inhaled slowly, reminding herself not to escalate. She needed to find a resolution, not an argument. Glancing around, she saw that curious eyes were already on her, some from the line, some from passers-by. "Can I speak to a supervisor, please?" A flicker of annoyance crossed Jill's face. "I'll call for one, if you must. But I'm telling you, if the system doesn't have your name, there's no ticket for you. Now step aside." Naomi clenched her jaw. She collected her papers and moved out of the line. This was more than a technical glitch. Her gut told her something else was at play. Could the system have accidentally cancelled the alias's booking? Or was Jill exercising some sort of personal bias? Around her, life continued in the airport. Announcement after announcement droned in the background. Boarding calls, flight delays, gate changes. Naomi felt the invisible clock ticking. If she missed this flight, how would she trail the suspect? She considered calling her contact, but she was trained to handle unpredicted roadblocks independently whenever possible. 2 minutes passed. 5 minutes. 10. Jill continued checking in other travelers without so much as a glance in Naomi's direction. Finally, Naomi took out her phone, half ready to escalate this matter, when a well-dressed man came around the counter. He wore a badge, Stephen Mercer, floor supervisor. "Ma'am, I understand there's an issue with your ticket," he said, scanning her with polite curiosity. Naomi extended her hand. "Yes, my name is Naomi Johnson. I have a reservation for the flight to Chicago, but the system supposedly can't find it." She explained the steps she had taken. "Is there any way you can verify directly with the main reservation line? I have a printed confirmation, but your agent says it's not in the system." Stephen nodded, politely ignoring Jill's dismissive expression. "Sure, let me check." He settled behind another computer terminal. Naomi handed over her printout for reference, and for a few moments the only sounds were the faint tapping of keys and overhead announcements. Then Stephen paused, his eyebrows furrowed. "I do see a reservation that matches your confirmation number, but there's a note attached to the record," Stephen said slowly. "It says the passenger must provide additional identification documentation, something about a mismatch with your ID." Naomi's insides went tight. A mismatch? She had used top-level resources to craft a flawless alias. Any mismatch might indicate a deeper problem. She kept her voice steady. "That's unusual. My ID is accurate, and it's the same name as on the reservation." Stephen offered a kindly shrug. The note might have been flagged automatically. It's not typical, but sometimes, if the system can't verify an ID, it requests additional checks. "Let me just override it, since your ID clearly matches the name, and you have the right confirmation. Then I can get you your boarding pass." Relief began to warm Naomi's chest. She nodded in thanks, mentally noting that she'd have to file a report to ensure the alias was still safe. Then Jill interjected, "But her name didn't show up when I did a manual search." Stephen shot Jill a slightly perplexed look. "I'm seeing it now, and it's definitely valid." Leaning back in his chair, he turned toward Naomi. "Apologies, Miss Johnson. Let's get you squared away. Looks like your seat's in 14C. He typed quickly, and the printer began to whir. Naomi decided to let it go. She had bigger concerns than a rude ticket agent. But Jill, presumably feeling slighted in front of her supervisor, cast a sharp, offended glance toward Naomi as the boarding pass slid out. Naomi's well-trained instincts caught something like resentment in Jill's eyes. She carefully avoided any confrontation, took her boarding pass, and gave Stephen a warm smile. "Thank you for clearing that up," she said softly. "I really appreciate it." As she walked away, her mind ran through the possibilities. Was Jill's odd behavior simply prejudice, or was there something more? Naomi reminded herself that she might be overthinking. People came in all varieties, some simply harbored bigotry or personal vendettas against strangers for reasons known only to themselves. All Naomi knew was that her mission, and a suspect who could pose a real threat, awaited her on that plane. She had to let go of petty slights to stay focused. Yet, as she moved to the security checkpoint, she couldn't help noticing Jill pick up a phone, lips pursed in frustration. Naomi's nerves prickled. She told herself it was probably just Jill venting to a colleague, but a small part of her wondered if that phone call might foreshadow more trouble ahead. Naomi had traveled incognito dozens of times, if not more, and passing through security was typically the least eventful part of her routine, unless she was singled out for a random search or got stuck behind an especially slow queue. But that day, each step held tension like the hair trigger of a loaded pistol. She joined the line at the Transportation Security Administration checkpoint, where uniformed TSA officers kept watch. Even though she worked for a branch of Homeland Security, she had to follow the same process as any civilian. The less attention she drew, the better. She removed her laptop from her bag, slipped her shoes off, and placed them into the tray. She stepped through the body scanner without issue. As she collected her belongings, a voice barked behind her, "Monsieur A.M., please step aside." She stiffened, glancing around. A tall TSA agent with close-cropped hair gestured her away from the regular flow of travelers. Naomi felt her pulse quicken. She stepped aside, trying not to look alarmed. "Yes?" she inquired evenly. "I need to run an additional check on your carry-on," said the agent, who wore a name badge that read Officer Bryant. He reached for her bag, opened it, and rummaged through her carefully packed items. Naomi was used to spot checks, but usually they were quite brief. This one felt like more than routine. Bryant's motions were almost accusatory. "Everything all right?" Naomi asked. He frowned, withdrew a small toiletry bottle, and inspected it suspiciously. "It's just an additional screening." His voice carried a professional edge, but Naomi detected the same sort of tension she had seen in Jill. Was it pure coincidence? She inhaled slowly. If he uncovered her Homeland Security badge tucked in a hidden compartment, her entire cover could be compromised. He rummaged deeper, flipping through the side pockets. She considered the risk of quietly revealing her official status, but that would mean pulling rank. Generally, she avoided doing that unless absolutely necessary. Minutes later, he zipped the bag shut, evidently finding nothing. "You're free to go," he said curtly. "Enjoy your flight." Naomi nodded, grabbed her things, and quickly drifted away from the checkpoint. She reflected on the strange atmosphere. Perhaps she was just imagining these slights, noticing negativity because she was particularly stressed. Still, her instincts rarely failed. Every step she took reminded her that something about today felt off. She found a quiet corner near Gate B12 and sank into a seat, scanning the area. She had studied the suspect's file repeatedly, memorizing the face and approximate height. The suspect was believed to be a young man in his early 20s, known for forging official IDs and funneling that data to bigger criminal operations. Intelligence suggested he would be traveling under a stolen identity. Naomi's job was to spot him before he vanished into Chicago's busy streets. Her eyes roamed over the travelers. A mother coaxed her toddler to sit still. A group of college students chattered excitedly about an upcoming event. A businessman in an expensive suit typed furiously on his laptop. A newlywed couple held hands, wearing matching "just married" T-shirts, but no sign of the suspect. Naomi's phone remained silent. Her contact would only text her if the suspect's location had changed, or if there was an urgent development. Yet again, she spotted Jill at the far end of the corridor, apparently walking toward a break room. Jill's gaze flicked momentarily in Naomi's direction. Naomi pretended not to notice, turning her attention to a magazine stand. She told herself she might be hyper-aware, seeing conspiracies where there were none. With nearly 40 minutes until boarding, Naomi decided to get something to eat. A small deli nearby offered fresh sandwiches. She lined up behind a few other passengers. While waiting, she overheard bits of conversation from two men behind her, discussing the security fiasco at some other gate. She couldn't help but pay attention, but it seemed to be about a passenger with an expired passport. By the time Naomi collected her sandwich, she felt her tension subside slightly. She told herself that focusing too intensely on potential sabotage could become a distraction from her true mission. She found a seat by the gate and ate quietly, scanning once more for Silver Hawk. Most of the seats were empty. Boarding wouldn't start for another half hour. The mood at Gate B12 was unremarkable. A handful of early arrivers rummaging through newspapers, a few half-asleep travelers dozing with headphones on. Then, abruptly, an announcement burst over the pass system. "Attention, all passengers waiting for Global Skies Flight 472 to Chicago. There will be a brief delay in boarding. Our gate agents will provide more information shortly." A wave of murmured complaint rippled through the waiting area. Naomi felt her nerves jangle. Delays happened frequently, but given the morning's events, she could not help questioning it. If the flight was delayed, the suspect might change plans, or she might lose her chance to intercept him. She checked her phone for any updates from her contact. Nothing new. She slung her carry-on over her shoulder and approached the podium. Two gate agents were busy explaining the delay to disgruntled passengers. One was a tall, bespectacled man in a crisp uniform, the other a short woman with curly hair who was tapping something into a tablet. Naomi overheard them mention maintenance issues. "Excuse me," she said gently when it was her turn to ask, "will this delay be significant?" The tall agent offered an apologetic nod. "We're looking at about 15 to 20 minutes. The aircraft needed some extra servicing, but everything should be cleared soon." Naomi nodded, though a gnawing anxiety gripped her. She decided to step aside, away from the crowd, and placed a quick call to her local DHS contact. Her phone rang 3 times before the line picked up. "This is Marshall," said a gruff voice. "Marshall, it's me." "Naomi," she said in a low voice. "Listen, are we still on track for the operation in Chicago? My flight's delayed. Anything new about Silver Hawk's movements?" A pause. Then Marshall's voice returned. "Nothing new from my side. We've got local assets standing by. Just make sure you're on that plane. If you need a secondary plan, we can provide backup, but it'd be a last resort. We don't want to spook the target." "Understood," she said. "Thanks." She hung up, exhaling. With a little luck, the delay would be minor, and she could still complete her mission. She felt the hum of tension in her chest, but a part of her was also thankful for the short respite. She could run through her plan once more, keep an eye out for any sign of the suspect. Somewhere behind her, an argument flared. Naomi pivoted in time to see a middle-aged passenger raising his voice at the gate agents, complaining about missing connections. She watched as the short agent tried to placate him with free meal vouchers. This was standard airport drama. Usually it didn't concern her, but the creeping feeling that something was amiss refused to leave her. At last, the boarding announcement crackled through the speakers. "Now, boarding global skies. Flight 472 to Chicago. First class and premium passengers are invited to board at this time." A small group of well-dressed individuals queued up. Naomi, seated in economy, would normally wait for her zone, but her seat was fairly close to the front. She checked her boarding pass. Group 2. She would be called soon. She stood and edged closer to the boarding lane, scanning each passenger that filed through. She was looking for any sign of a face that matched the suspect's description. Nothing stood out yet. Soon they called Group 2. Naomi, feeling the usual swirl of pre-flight nerves, approached the gate agent. It was the tall, bespectacled man she had seen earlier. He checked her boarding pass, scanned it, and motioned her forward without hesitation. "Have a good flight," he said politely. Naomi stepped onto the jet bridge, the hum of the aircraft's ventilation filling her ears. Inside the plane, a flight attendant greeted her. She navigated to seat 14C, stowed her carry-on overhead, and settled in. The seat was near the aisle, which was ideal if she needed to move quickly for any reason. She took note of her fellow passengers in the rows around her. An elderly couple sat across the aisle on the left, bickering softly about whether they had left the oven on at home. A teenage girl behind Naomi clutched a stuffed giraffe. In front of her, a large man in a sports jersey was trying to fit an oversized carry-on under the seat. The flight attendant announced that boarding would continue for the next few minutes. Naomi's eyes stayed fixed on the door, searching for an individual who might match Silver Hawk's description: medium height, slender build, dark hair, possibly wearing trendy streetwear to blend in. If he had changed his look drastically, she'd have to rely on instinct. If she missed him entirely, the operation could fail. Her heart thumped with a mixture of excitement and concern. Passengers kept streaming in, but none resembled the suspect. Could he already be on board from an earlier group? Or would he arrive last, skirting attention? Naomi remembered that cunning criminals sometimes boarded at the final call, hoping no one was paying attention. She scanned each new passenger carefully. Moments later, her phone vibrated. She glanced down to see a text from Marshall. Suspect definitely on flight manifest. Priority watch. That meant Silver Hawk had successfully checked in under whatever alias he was using. Her eyes intensified their search. Then she spotted a young man near the back of the boarding line, slender, wearing a black hoodie, baseball cap pulled low, with a restless energy in his stance. She couldn't see his face clearly, but her instincts kicked into high gear. Was that him? The man paused near row 20 and slid into a seat. Naomi tried to look without drawing attention. She glimpsed part of his profile, sharp jaw, dark hair. Could be a match. She made a mental note to pass him if she needed to go to the restroom, discreetly confirm features. Just as she was about to relax into her seat, a commotion arose at the front of the cabin. A flight attendant politely but firmly told a passenger to calm down. The voice that responded was unmistakably Jill's. Naomi felt a spike of disbelief. Was the gate agent from earlier now on the plane? Indeed, Jill appeared in the aisle, speaking quietly but emphatically to the flight attendant. Naomi's stomach knotted. Airline staff sometimes hopped flights, but it was unusual to see a check-in agent physically board the plane unless they were traveling themselves or had urgent business. Jill's face was flushed, and her eyes darted across the cabin. Then those eyes landed on Naomi with a flash of recognition. Naomi watched, trying to hide her tension, as Jill conferred with a tall, muscular man behind her, who wore a Global Skies ID badge around his neck. Possibly a security manager or some kind of in-flight supervisor. They whispered among themselves for a few moments, occasionally glancing in Naomi's direction. Passengers nearby grew restless, sensing a disturbance. Finally, the tall man stepped forward and cleared his throat. "Miss Johnson," he said, his voice carrying across the seats. The sudden hush amplified his words, drawing curious stares from other travelers. Naomi's mind raced. This could not be good. "Yes?" she asked, her voice controlled but calm. "I'm afraid there's an issue with your ticket," he announced. "We're going to have to ask you to deplane and speak with us at the jet bridge." Her pulse throbbed in her ears. The middle-aged man in front of her twisted around to gawk. The flight attendant looked uncertain, glancing between Naomi and the tall man. Jill stood off to the side, arms folded, her expression unreadable. Naomi forced composure. "We already resolved the ticket issue. I have my boarding pass, and I'm seated properly." The tall man's voice had the forced politeness of someone who wanted no argument. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we need to re-verify some information. Please gather your belongings." All round her, passengers murmured. Some watched with fleeting interest. Others just wanted the flight to depart on time. Naomi's mind flashed with alarm. If she were forced off the plane, her entire operation could unravel. She also risked losing track of the suspect. She took a careful breath, standing up slowly. "I'll cooperate," she said, "but can we do this quickly? I have an urgent engagement in Chicago." The tall man didn't respond, except to step aside, gesturing for her to exit. Naomi grabbed her carry-on from the overhead bin and followed him, feeling the hot stares of curious passengers all around. Jill led the way up the aisle, and Naomi caught the flicker of smug satisfaction crossing her face. Once on the jet bridge, the door to the plane hissed shut behind them. A few flight attendants remained near the door, possibly out of earshot, but close enough to intervene if things escalated. The air felt colder here, more sterile. Standing in the cramped space, Jill wasted no time. She confronted Naomi with a stern glare. "We had a problem with your ID at check-in," Jill said. "Your reservation was flagged. The supervisor might have overridden it, but I have the authority to request additional verification if I suspect fraud or any wrongdoing." Naomi's mind spun with possible responses. She had painstakingly crafted an alias that should pass scrutiny. If Jill had discovered some anomaly, it likely pointed to an outside interference. Or Jill might simply be acting on prejudice or personal vendetta. Naomi's chest tightened. "That's outrageous," Naomi replied, keeping her tone measured. "Your colleague cleared me to fly. I have all the correct documents." The tall man, his name badge read Greg Hudson, Airline Security Specialist, stepped in. "We're not accusing you of anything outright, Miss Johnson. But Miss Farrell," he nodded toward Jill, "expressed concern about a possible mismatch with your ID. We have to take that seriously. We'd prefer to resolve this quietly and get you back on board if everything checks out." Naomi glanced at Jill's scowling expression. Was she trying to sabotage Naomi's flight for personal reasons, or did she truly suspect some foul play? Her instincts told her Jill was no innocent, but Naomi had to tread carefully. If she revealed her Homeland Security credentials now, she could blow her cover in front of any watchers, possibly even alert the suspect that a federal agent was on board. Yet if she didn't reveal her true identity, they might bar her from flying. She needed a middle path. Summoning her professional poise, Naomi addressed Greg calmly. "I understand security protocols. Let me show you my identification again. I'm happy to comply with any official checks." She handed over her driver's license that matched the alias, plus the boarding pass. Greg studied them intently. Jill stood at his shoulder, looking for any sign of mismatch. Greg's brow furrowed. "This name and ID number do match. I don't see any immediate discrepancy, but the system flagged her," Jill insisted, color rising in her cheeks. "And we have the right to deny boarding if something seems suspicious." Naomi's frustration bubbled. She took a slow breath. "I'm not sure why the system flagged me. Possibly an error. If you have a direct line to the reservation desk, we can clear this up." "I need to be on that plane. I'm not a threat to anyone." Greg hesitated, obviously trying to balance Jill's allegations with the evidence in his hands. "Miss Farrell, do you have any specific reason, besides the system flag, for suspecting Miss Johnson? We can't remove someone from a flight just because of a technical glitch." Jill squared her jaw. She was belligerent at the counter. Naomi's eyebrows shot up. "I wasn't belligerent. You refused to help me, so your supervisor stepped in. That's hardly my fault." Jill's voice rose. "I don't appreciate your tone. You people always—" She stopped abruptly, as if realizing she'd almost said something that might get her in trouble. But the words hung there, toxic and revealing. Naomi's pulse kicked. She was painfully familiar with that brand of hostility. She saw Greg's expression flicker with caution. A tense silence followed. The air crackled with unspoken animosity. Finally, Greg exhaled. "All right, let's do a quick call to reservations for a final verification. If it checks out, we'll let Miss Johnson board. Miss Farrell, is that acceptable?" Jill pursed her lips, displeased, but she didn't argue. Greg pulled out a phone. Naomi stood, arms at her sides, resisting the urge to show her official credentials. She had to weigh which risk was greater, losing track of the suspect or blowing the entire mission. She prayed that the override was still in the system, that everything would confirm her legitimacy. Several excruciating minutes passed as Greg talked with someone from the reservation department. Naomi caught phrases like "yes," "the confirmation number is," and "the ID matched." So she waited, inhaling and exhaling in measured intervals, letting the tension seep away, if only for a moment. Jill tapped her foot impatiently, arms crossed. At last, Greg ended the call, turning to Jill. "It's confirmed. Miss Johnson has a valid reservation and ID that matches." He handed Naomi back her documents. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience, MAAM." Jill's features hardened, but she had no recourse. "Fine," she snapped, "but if something goes wrong, I'll note that I flagged her. I tried to protect us from any issues." She strode away without a farewell. Greg looked mortified. "I apologize, Miss Johnson. That was unusual." He handed Naomi a business card bearing the Global Skies customer service line. "If you feel you've been treated unfairly, you can file a complaint, but I'd still like to escort you back on board to smooth things over." Naomi nodded, forcing a polite smile. "I appreciate that, Mr. Hudson." She wanted to escape the situation and regroup before takeoff. In her peripheral vision, she watched Jill vanish around a corner, still fuming. Back on the plane, some heads turned again, passengers half standing to see the commotion. Naomi tried to ignore them, focusing on one vital thought: she had made it back on the flight. Soon they'd be airborne, and she could resume her real mission. The only question was whether the incident had attracted the suspect's attention. Naomi settled into seat 14C once more. A flight attendant came by to confirm everything was all right, offering a forced smile that hinted the airline hated drama like this. Naomi nodded, sinking lower in her seat. Inside, she reeled from the stress. She had encountered racism and hostility in her life, but rarely did it threaten to derail an entire operation. She silently vowed that Jill's petty vendetta, whatever its root, would not ruin her mission. The plane door sealed, the jet bridge retracted, and the engines whirred to life. Naomi exhaled her tension, telling herself, "You're on the plane. That's half the battle." If the suspect had noticed the kerfuffle, he might be on guard, but at least he couldn't disembark now. They were stuck together until Chicago. A crisp voice filled the cabin. "Welcome aboard. Global Skies, Flight 472 service to Chicago O'Hare International Airport. Flight time will be approximately 1 hour and 50 minutes. Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff." Soon, the aircraft taxied and roared down the runway. Naomi felt the familiar press of acceleration pinning her to the seat as they rose into the sky. She watched Atlanta shrink below the window, sunlight glinting on the city's skyscrapers. She tried to refocus on the mission. Step 1, confirm the suspect's seat number. Step 2, keep watch discreetly. Step 3, wait for the right moment to identify him to local DHS agents in Chicago. After reaching cruising altitude, the seatbelt sign dinged off. Passengers began to relax. The flight attendants rolled out beverage carts. Naomi removed a small folder from her bag, reviewing notes about the suspect, known associates, prior addresses, possible fake IDs. She kept her posture casual, the folder partly concealed by an in-flight magazine. Half an hour later, the drink service arrived at Naomi's row. She ordered water, scanning the aisle to see if the suspect, the young man in the baseball cap, ordered anything. He did, a soda. She glimpsed more of his face as he leaned into the aisle. Yes, this was almost certainly her target. The shape of his jaw, the narrow nose, and the tense manner in which he tapped his fingers on the tray table. She felt a jolt of excitement. The operation was still viable. Now she just had to remain inconspicuous. If he sensed her attention, he might cause trouble or go to ground the moment they landed. Naomi had to maintain subtlety at all costs, no more disruptions. She sipped her water, occasionally glancing at a magazine to appear uninterested. Then, as if fate was determined to test her, trouble found her again. The flight attendant pulled aside the curtain near the galley, revealing Jill standing there with a phone pressed to her ear. Naomi's pulse spiked. Why was Jill on this plane at all? She told herself Jill might just be a non-working airline employee traveling to Chicago. But Jill's continued presence close to the flight attendants was suspicious. Naomi saw Jill pass a meaningful look to one of the cabin crew members, who nodded, then left to deliver coffee to the cockpit. In her seat, Naomi felt a swirl of dread. She realized Jill might not be done with her. Maybe Jill was lodging a formal complaint with the captain or the airline's corporate office. Maybe she intended to push the matter further. Or maybe Jill was making some personal call, but Naomi's instincts screamed otherwise. Time ticked on. Naomi managed to keep an eye on the suspect, who busied himself with a phone game. She had to be ready in case he tried to move around the cabin or tamper with anything. That was the bigger threat, overshadowing Jill's personal vendetta. But the tension was draining her. She felt hemmed in by the seat, anxious. Finally, the flight attendant's announcement broke through Naomi's thoughts. "We'll be encountering some turbulence shortly. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." The plane began a slight shudder. Naomi tried to maintain an unaffected expression, but her mind raced. She repeated her mission goals like a mantra. Confirm suspect identity. Ensure safe approach. Coordinate with Chicago DHS. She closed her eyes briefly, inhaling, exhaling, letting the adrenaline settle. Outside, clouds passed in thick swirls. The overhead bins rattled softly. As the turbulence intensified, a few passengers whimpered or tightened their grips on the armrests. Suddenly, Jill strode down the aisle, ignoring the fasten seatbelt sign. She stopped right by Naomi's row, glaring at her. "Come with me," Jill ordered. "I need to speak with you." Naomi's jaw clenched. "I'm sorry, but the seatbelt sign is on," she replied, trying not to escalate. Jill bristled, raising her voice. "I said come with me." Heads were turning. Passengers from rows ahead and behind peeked over seats. The flight attendant, the same one who had offered Naomi water, hurried over. "Mike, Farrell, you need to be seated during turbulence," the flight attendant admonished softly. "We can't have passengers in the aisle right now." Jill snapped. "This is urgent. She's a security risk. I need her in the galley." A hush fell over that part of the cabin. Naomi's heart hammered. Another public confrontation would definitely alert the suspect. She could see him 3 rows back, twisting in his seat to watch. If he hadn't suspected her involvement before, he might now. "Miss Farrell," Naomi said firmly, "I'm not a security risk. Your colleague already cleared me." She cast an imploring glance at the flight attendant. "I would like to comply, but the seatbelt sign is on." This is not the time. The plane lurched with a bump of turbulence, cutting her off. Jill stumbled but grabbed onto a seat back. Her fury burned in her eyes. "Do you want me to call the captain?" Jill threatened, pulling out her phone. "We can divert this plane if you refuse to cooperate." Passengers gasped at the word divert. A flurry of anxious chatter erupted in the cabin. The flight attendant's face paled. Diverting a flight was an extreme measure, usually reserved for genuine threats or emergencies. Jill was playing a dangerous game with hundreds of people's time, safety, and possibly Naomi's mission. Naomi's mind raced. She couldn't let the flight divert. Silver Hawk might slip away, or worse, the entire operation might blow up. Her cover was precarious. She made a snap decision. "All right, let's not cause a scene. I'll go with you as soon as the turbulence subsides. Please, just let me stay seated until it's safe to move around." Jill looked ready to argue but seemed to hesitate. The flight attendant, seizing the moment, said, "Yes, Miss Farrell, please, we need you to remain seated. We'll handle any issues once the captain turns off the seatbelt sign." With a clenched jaw, Jill retreated to an empty seat nearby, glaring daggers at Naomi. The overhead lights flickered momentarily as the plane rocked. Naomi willed the turbulence to subside quickly. She felt every nerve on edge. The suspect's seat behind her remained quiet, but she felt the weight of his stare. The entire flight had turned into a powder keg, ready to ignite if Jill continued pressing. 5 minutes stretched into 10. The turbulence was relentless, pockets of air rocking them side to side. At last, the plane leveled out, and the overhead sign chimed, indicating it was safe to move about. Jill immediately stood. "Now," she said, voice cold as ice, "follow me." She moved to the galley at the back of the plane. Naomi unbuckled, ignoring the anxious stares of the travelers around her, and followed. Near the rear galley, the noise of the engines was louder. A flight attendant was busy securing rattling coffee pots. As soon as they were somewhat alone, Jill turned on Naomi. Her face was twisted with anger. "I talked to someone in the security department. They told me there's something off about you, Miss Johnson. I want the truth." Naomi's stomach flipped. Had Jill discovered her real identity, or was this another bluff? "I've shown my ID. I have a valid ticket. I'm just a passenger," Naomi said. "What more do you want?" Jill's lip curled. "Don't lie to me. I have the authority to have you detained upon landing. Unless you come clean right now." Naomi felt the cold sweat of crisis. She could see no easy way out. Jill could force an early landing and blow the entire mission. Or Naomi could flash her Homeland Security credentials, thereby revealing her cover. If Jill had already spoken to security officials, she might be half an inch away from discovering that Naomi's ID was a carefully crafted alias. Before she could respond, Jill's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, the screen's glow reflecting in her eyes. She typed something in response, then pocketed the phone. "Well," she snapped, "I'm waiting." Naomi made her decision. She lowered her voice. "Look, Miss Farrell, you're about to do something that could have serious consequences for you and your employer. I am here on official government business. Not that you have any right to that information." Jill's nostrils flared. "Government business? Don't make me laugh. You're some kind of con artist. Maybe worse." Naomi locked eyes with Jill, then slowly reached inside her blazer. She withdrew a discreet leather wallet, flipping it open just enough to reveal the Department of Homeland Security badge. She kept it low, so passing passengers wouldn't see. But Jill's mouth fell open. The color drained from her face. "Undercover?" Jill rasped. Her expression vacillated between shock and indignation. Naomi's words were measured, quiet, each syllable weighed with the gravity of her authority. "Undercover. Department of Homeland Security. Your actions are jeopardizing a major federal investigation. If you alert anyone else or cause a diversion, you could be charged with obstructing a federal operation." A flicker of panic crossed Jill's eyes. She stammered, "But I was certain you were lying. I've seen so many." She trailed off, searching for an excuse or a justification for her hostility. Naomi pressed on. "I understand you might have had concerns, but you need to stand down right now. I have a suspect on this plane. When we land in Chicago, local DHS will apprehend them. Your interference could ruin everything." Jill's lips trembled, frustration and fear battling in her expression. "But you're black," she mumbled, as if it explained her suspicion. Naomi felt a stab of anger, but she forced it down, focusing on the mission. "That's your prejudice talking," Naomi said, her tone unwavering. "And I don't have time to argue about it. Right now, you have two choices. You can let me do my job, or you can make a choice that will cost you yours. Do you understand?" Jill blinked, swallowing. She nodded shakily, glancing away as if she couldn't bear Naomi's gaze. Naomi recognized the swirl of emotions in Jill: guilt, humiliation, the abrupt collapse of her supposed moral high ground. A heavy silence enveloped them, only punctuated by the faint clink of the beverage cart. I'm sorry," Jill croaked finally. "I didn't know." Naomi's face remained impassive. "Stay out of my way for the rest of this flight. Do not mention a word to anyone. That is an order." She snapped the leather wallet shut, sliding it back into her blazer. "We have a suspect to catch." Without waiting for a response, Naomi turned and headed back to her seat, leaving Jill standing in the galley, stunned and speechless. The rest of the flight passed in a tense hush. Naomi returned to her seat. Jill disappeared, presumably confined to some jump seat or simply choosing to remain out of sight. The suspect in row 20 dozed with his baseball cap pulled low, or at least pretended to. Naomi eyed him occasionally, pondering how best to move on him after landing. 30 minutes before arrival in Chicago, Naomi's phone vibrated with a coded text from Marshall, confirmed seat 20E. Stand by for ground intercept. Relief spread through her. The plan was set. She just needed to ensure the suspect didn't slip away during the scramble off the plane. She discreetly readied herself for the post-landing chaos. She'd let the suspect disembark, tail him through the terminal, and meet up with Marshall's team for the takedown. Meanwhile, Jill made no further attempts to contact Naomi. That was fine by Naomi. She was done with Jill's meddling. At last, the plane began its descent. The flight attendants instructed everyone to store trays and return seats to upright positions. Through the window, Naomi glimpsed the sprawl of Chicago's skyline, a labyrinth of towering buildings and bustling highways. She took a calming breath, bracing for the final phase of her mission. Upon touchdown, the plane taxied to the gate. A wave of relief and anticipation washed over Naomi. She heard phones chiming as passengers reconnected to cellular networks. People unbuckled, stood in the aisle, and began the usual scramble for overhead luggage. The suspect rose, collecting his hoodie and backpack, anxious to disembark. Naomi waited, letting him go ahead. She didn't want to spook him. Stepping into the jet bridge, Naomi kept her distance, watching him casually. He walked with a slight limp, or maybe it was just heavy footsteps. The crowd funneled into the terminal. Naomi's phone vibrated again. "We see him. Wait near Starbucks." That indicated Marshall's team had eyes on him. Perfect. Naomi drifted toward the Starbucks kiosk near the gate exit. She spotted two men in plain clothes, DHS agents. She recognized, lingering with coffee cups, eyes pinned on the suspect. The suspect had no clue. He strode toward baggage claim, glancing at his phone. In a swift, synchronized move, the agents closed in on him. Federal agents. "Stop!" One barked, brandishing a badge. Surprised, the suspect tried to bolt, but they were too quick. Within seconds, they had him pinned. Nearby travelers gasped, stepping back in alarm. Naomi calmly approached to support her team, flashing her credentials. "Silver Hawk," she said quietly, addressing the suspect by his code name. "Your days of forging identities end here." His eyes burned with fury, but he had no escape. The agents cuffed him. People began filming on their phones, the scene generating excited chatter. Airport security arrived moments later, wide-eyed. It was over. The suspect was in custody, the operation successful. Naomi felt a surge of triumphant relief. She stepped aside, letting the team handle the official arrest. From the corner of her eye, she saw a nervous figure approaching. It was Jill, trailing behind a uniformed Global Skies supervisor. Their expressions were apprehensive. "Miss Johnson," Jill said quietly, wringing her hands. "I want to." Naomi raised a hand, stopping her. She wasn't in the mood for a drawn-out apology. The swirl of adrenaline and relief left her wanting only a moment of peace. "You saw what happened," Naomi said, her tone neutral. "I trust you understand now that I was telling the truth." Jill's face flushed. The supervisor beside her cleared his throat, addressing Naomi with a tone of utmost respect. "On behalf of Global Skies, we want to apologize for any inconvenience. We would like to offer you some form of compensation and ensure we address any misconduct." Naomi looked between them. She could sense Jill's shame. A part of her wanted to lash out, to remind Jill exactly how bigoted her behavior had been. But Naomi had spent years in law enforcement. She believed consequences would follow naturally. "Your airline can contact me through my department," she said, offering a curt nod. Jill's eyes glistened as if she might cry. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, voice trembling. I didn't realize." Naomi almost felt sorry for Jill's confusion, but Jill's prejudice had nearly derailed an entire federal operation and threatened Naomi's safety. The airline might issue Jill a reprimand or dismissal. That was their decision, not Naomi's. She gave Jill one final, hard look. "Be careful who you judge next time," Naomi said quietly. "We're not always who you assume." She turned away, letting the tall supervisor comfort a shaken Jill. As Naomi walked toward the escalators leading to baggage claim, she let out a long breath. She had done her job. Justice had been served, not just for the suspect, but in some small way for all the biases that had tried to hold her back. 2 days later, Naomi sat in a Chicago office building, finalizing her field report. Marshall stood by her desk, scanning the details. "Nice job," he said, signing off on it with a flourish. "We got him behind bars, and the ring is scrambling without their key forger. You nailed it." Naomi gave a modest shrug. Was touch and go for a while. The airline fiasco almost blew it. Marshall nodded gravely. "Speaking of that, you'll be pleased to know that the department has been in touch with Global Skies. They're doing a formal internal investigation of that gate agent, Jill Farrell. There are allegations of discriminatory behavior." Naomi felt a small pang, recalling Jill's desperate face. She had no personal vendetta against Jill, but the woman's choices had consequences. "I'm sure they'll handle it appropriately." Within the week, the story had leaked to the press. Certain passengers on the plane, outraged by how Jill singled Naomi out, posted videos and accounts on social media. They described how a black woman was nearly thrown off a flight, only for the revelation to come later that she was a federal officer on a top-secret mission. An outcry erupted, condemning the airline's racism, praising Naomi for her composure. Global Skies scrambled to do damage control. Their official statement apologized for any misunderstanding, but the public reaction was fierce. Jill was suspended pending investigation, and rumors circulated she might be fired. The story gained traction, reigniting debates about racial profiling and the embarrassment of being singled out for looking suspicious. Naomi, wanting to maintain her undercover status for future missions, declined to appear publicly. She remained unnamed in official statements, referred to only as the passenger involved. Quietly, though, Naomi felt a sense of closure. The entire ordeal had been nerve-wracking, but it also shone a light on an issue she'd faced countless times: prejudice, disguised as security concern. This time, the world saw it too. That evening, Naomi strolled down a Chicago street ablaze with city lights. She stopped by a small jazz lounge to unwind. The soft horns and piano lulled her into reflection. She sipped a sparkling water, letting the music wash away the tension of the past few days. She remembered Jill's stammered apology, the stunned look on the suspect's face as he was arrested, the swirl of phone cameras capturing everything. Sometimes karma moved swiftly. Jill's prejudice had ended up exposing her for who she was in front of an entire plane of passengers, and the suspect's arrogance had led him right into the hands of the DHS. Naomi reminded herself that while justice had prevailed, the fight was never over. Every mission, every new day, she might face more illusions, more assumptions made about her because of her skin color or her unassuming demeanor. But she would keep doing what she did, protecting the country from threats while living in the shadows of anonymity. Tonight, though, she could cherish a small triumph. If Jill ever changed her ways, that was better for everyone. If the suspect's arrest spared potential victims from identity theft, that was worth celebrating. Naomi closed her eyes, absorbing the jazz melody, feeling the city's pulse sync with her own. She took in a deep breath and let it go, quietly savoring her private victory. When everyday prejudice collides with unstoppable determination, the result can shake entire industries and spark urgent discussions around fairness and respect. What began as one woman's quiet flight to Chicago, met with rude suspicions and overt bias, exploded into a powerful statement on why judging someone solely by their appearance can backfire in dramatic, life-changing ways. Her courage revealed the danger of prejudice, exposed hidden wrongdoing, and secured justice. Now, it's our turn to spread the message. Each time someone stands against discrimination, they pave the way for a more just, empathetic world. If this story left you fired up or wanting to take a stand, share it with a friend who needs inspiration. If you loved the dramatic twists and lessons learned, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that challenge our assumptions and push for a better society. Your support makes a difference together. Let's keep moving forward.